Everybody. There's lots of seats up the front here. No pressure, yeah. Good morning. I'm Amanda Morford. I'm one of the ACECQA board members and just really want to welcome you all here this morning, particularly to this portion of the conference about leadership and the National Quality Framework. In this session, you're going to participate in a hands-on training session that focuses specifically on leadership under the National Quality Framework. And I'd really like to welcome our two presenters today, Carolyn McGuinness and Kay Colmer, from the Professional Support Coordinator Alliance. Carolyn McGuinness is currently the Manager of Children's Services Central, and she has extensive experience across a range of service types, including out-of-school hours care, preschool and long day care. Kay is currently the CEO of GARI South Australia, where her priorities have been to build integrated professional development and learning programs. So I'll hand it over to you, ladies.
We meet. Oh, there we go. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to elders past, present and future. Kay and I will be with you today running this session, and it's all about the Advanced Diploma of Community Sector Management, which is the leadership qualification that the PSC Alliance has worked together towards. Kay is going to talk a bit about the development and the background of the course, and then we're going to do a bit of a tag team and tell you as much information about this course as possible.
One of the objects that we're hoping to achieve today is that you will go away with some useful information about the work that we're doing, and most of all what I hope you'll go away with today is to share our passion and enthusiasm for the importance of leadership, knowledge and theory and qualification for the work that we're all doing towards rolling out the National Quality Framework. So that's one of my key objectives.
What we are going to do today is give you a bit of a snapshot of some of the activities that we do throughout the modules. Now, keep in mind this is a 12-month qualification, so we're not going to be able to give you much information about the activities, but we're going to give you a bit of a taster. So the first thing we need you to do is, can you make sure that you're sitting next to at least 2 other people? So if you're not, just squish up a little bit. Oh, look at everyone move. Come on. Come on. Come on. All right. Now what we need you to do is we are going to be doing some activities that require you to do a bit of conversation. So in order to do this, we do need you to be able to have a conversation with the person next to you and be able to hear that. Now we have got a few more people than the normal 15 to 20 that we normally work with in this qualification. So what we will need you to do is have as quiet a conversation as you can about leadership with the people next to you. So first of all, I'd like you to think about something that has made a significant impact on you so far in this conference. And I'd like you to turn to one of the people next to you and have a conversation. If you're on the end, you might need to turn around either in front or behind you to have that conversation. So introduce yourself, where you're from, and talk about something that's made an impact on you from this conference and how you're going to share that within your service. All right, now that you've introduced yourselves, I'll bring you back to the session. Okay. Everybody found somebody to talk to? Great.
I think we've got a good sense now of the noise level that's going to occur when we do our interactive activities. It's very loud. Okay. Can I just find out how many people in this audience are actually leading in services? Very good, thank you. And how many people would view themselves as being in maybe a role of authority, having just heard the last speaker? Okay. How many people have just heard Paul speak about leadership in the keynote? Most of you? Now I'd like to try another technique which is going to be somewhat quieter, where I'd like you to actually just have 30 seconds or so of quiet reflection, and I'd like you to write down what was the key message that came out of Paul's session about leadership that has resonated most with you.
Okay, thanks for having that time. During this session, we'll just give you a bit of an overview on the who, so who's involved in this qualification and who are the participants. We're also going to look at why the course was developed, so a bit about the process and the rationale for the qualification and why it came about. We're also going to look at the what, which is a bit more about the structure and the flexibility of the course and how we're working across Australia to deliver that. We're also going to look at how long the course has been delivered and links to practice, links to structure around leadership, and also some of the learning experiences which we've just done a little snippet of. So all of this at the end, we're also going to round up with a couple of reflections from practitioners that are actually involved in the course or have actually completed the qualification. Now, one of the questions that we do get a lot is, who is the Professional Support Coordinators Alliance? The Professional Support Coordinators Alliance is made up of 7 state-based organisations. You can see the logos up there, so there's a different one in every state and territory. And what we do is we work to support and resource the services within their states and territories, but we also have a national focus where we work together. And some of this is around a strategic plan development, which leadership has been a big part of our strategic plan since about 2009, where it was a lot of research based around the Australian context of early childhood and education and care service delivery. And this led us to a lot of research, which was around integrated service delivery, it was around professional learning, and we developed some resources which are available on the PSC Alliance website. So just in case you're confused, we come up with a lot of acronyms, PSCA or PSC Alliance, and it's the Professional Support Coordinators Alliance. We're funded by the Department of Education, Employment and Workplace Relations, and we work in conjunction with the Inclusion and Professional Support Programs. So some of you might know your ISAs or your IPSUs, the Inclusion Support Agencies and the Indigenous Professional Support Units. So we all work in collaboration, but the PSC Alliance predominantly works together to deliver such things as this leadership qualification.
So I'm going to do the next section, and I don't know whether to stand up or sit down, because when I'm standing up I can't really read my notes, but anyway, I'll do a bit of a juggling act. So the importance of a leadership qualification, our object is to build capacity, to build leadership capacity throughout organisations. And I just wanted to reflect on, I've been in the role of CEO at the Gowrie in South Australia for 18 years. And prior to that, I was a leader in children's services for probably about 12 or 15 years before that. And about 10 years ago, I was invited to do a paper for an organisation that was in England. And when I started writing the paper about my experience, I suddenly had this horrible feeling that I actually lacked theoretical knowledge and background to really balance my ideas within a well-established way of thinking. And that was a bit of a shock to me, and I decided that I needed to do something about it. So I went and enrolled in a Masters of Leadership. But since that time, I've been driving that message right through our organisation. And so currently within our organisation, which is quite a small organisation, we've got about 56 staff, I've now got 8 of the staff who have either completed a postgraduate leadership qualification or who are studying towards one. And I can sit back and watch what's happened to our organisation as those people have undertaken that work. And it's not something that people take on lightly, because it is a lot of work, but it does build the capacity within the organisation in a way that one-off professional development activities can't do. So I was very passionate about developing a course that would give people a qualification and recognition for the work that they were going to put into it. So the course was actually developed through our work at Gowrie SA, and we self-funded this as a research project. So it was a bit of a long shot, but we wanted to work on the capacity of our own staff internally anyhow. So the process we used to develop the course was quite organic. We began with examining the research that the PSC Alliance had undertaken in 2008 and 2010, and that research, which was conducted by Macquarie University and Charles Sturt University, is on the PSC Alliance website if people want to look at that. So we extracted from those research reports all of the leadership capabilities that we thought were relevant to services implementing the NQF. Then we had a rather large list of capabilities, as you can imagine. And we then went through the NQS and the learning frameworks to look at what were the responsibilities of leaders to implement those frameworks. So we had quite large sets of information about the capabilities of leaders, but also the requirements of the NQS and the learning frameworks. So then we had to actually organise those into sensible lists of things that went together. And so we ended up developing 11 modules, which we'll show you shortly. So having done all of that work, when we started off to write the modules, we set it up so that the writing teams were going to be made up of one person who had experience as a trainer and a facilitator, and another person who was in a leadership role within the children's programs. So that was gives you an idea that this has really been built from the ground up. Having done all of that work, we then needed to find a qualification that we could map this work against. And after quite a lot of searching, we found the Advanced Diploma of Community Sector Management. And so then we had to go through a process of mapping the learning requirements of that to meet the vet sector requirements to our modules that we had developed. And so that was an extensive process that we actually sought partners to do that with, and we formed partnerships with the local South Australian Skills Board as well as the local TAFE, and so we worked on that together. And so all up, this work took us about 2 years. Once we had done all that work, we started delivering our course and then took it to the PSC Alliance and said, hey, we've done this work, are you interested? So investing in a qualification, I think, is really important, as I've just said, but the other idea we had was that we didn't want people to have to spend a lot of money. So we decided that we didn't have a lot of funds within our PSC work to deliver a qualification, and that probably wasn't really the core business. So we sought partnerships, and in South Australia we had state funds available through the state government, which was called Skills for All, and we were able to tap into that funding base so that participants who enrol in our course can actually do the course, 11 modules, for $500. Now that is remarkably good value. The course takes about a year, and I can't tell you off the top of my head how many days face-to-face it is, but it is quite a good qualification. You know, it's a very thorough qualification, and people are getting that for $500. So all of the states and territories have different state government arrangements, so each PSC in every state and territory is looking at possibilities for tapping into state government money so that they can subsidise the course through those kind of funds. So, for example, I can't really talk too much about New South Wales, but Carolyn tells me that in New South Wales there is funding that has been secured through the National Workforce Development Fund. So again, in New South Wales the course is subsidised, and I think the arrangements are that generally employers are sponsoring people to participate in the course through New South Wales. So again, creating partnerships that actually will lead to really good outcomes without our educators having to bear the expense. So flexible delivery, this is a really important part of this course. So as I said, there's 11 modules. People can enrol in one module, and they can enrol in the module as a professional development activity rather than as part of a qualification. There are assessments through the whole qualification, But if you enrol as a professional development experience, you still have to complete and undertake the project work, because the project work is part of the methodology for learning. So the only difference is if students enrol to do the one of the modules or several of the modules as professional development, they would do the work, but it wouldn't be assessed. So I can tell you in the South Australian experience, we've had a few people enrol in a module to get a taste of it, and they have all come back and said, hey, this is great, we want to do the whole course. So people are not opting out and saying we just want to do it as professional development. But services are able to say, this is our priority at the moment, so we want you to enrol in this particular module and you can start here. So people can start wherever in the course. So these are the modules. So you can see these are 7 modules which we developed that are face-to-face modules. And the reason for them being face-to-face is that the methodology we're using involves critical reflection and professional dialogue. So it's really important that we get groups of people together to do this work. Just to give you a little taste of taking charge of the NQF, this module encourages leaders to actually really approach this proactively rather than in a kind of reactive way saying, you know, this is all happening to us, we have to do this, you know, which is quite common out there. Instead, what we're doing is helping leaders to be really proactive and dynamic about wanting to participate in the NQS and helping their staff to understand the reasons for that. So the kind of things that are covered in that course include the kind of things like policies and procedures, developing systems of keeping information, understanding government policies, how to draw in all the stakeholders, because we've just heard Paul say how important it is to bring people in rather than tell them how to do it. How to set up and review the governance structures, because often governance structures are not really supportive of the kind of work you want to do. And how to develop a quality improvement plan which is inclusive rather than something that the leader of the site just writes and tells the staff, you know, this is our quality improvement plan and they've never seen it before. So we really want to make sure that this is that the work that's happening in services is happening from the ground up. The leading and managing change, just to give you a little snapshot about that, that's really uses leadership theories from a range of perspectives, but in particular we're really focusing on shared leadership approaches. So in that course we look at distributed leadership, where we're trying to find ways to help leaders within services understand the possibilities of all people being able to contribute to leadership, which again was something that Paul mentioned in the previous session. So, and that's a fine balance. It's the fine balance between the leader of the site understanding what their responsibilities are, but also opening up enough space for leaders within the services to enact leadership in their own right. And it's through that high-level involvement of leaders across an organisation that innovation and change starts to grow in an authentic way from the ground up. And I think, I don't know how many people here heard the demographer yesterday, Mark McCrindle, and he gave us some interesting insights about how Generation Y, I think, doesn't want to exist in an old hierarchical style. Well, I agree with that entirely, but I actually don't know that baby boomers and Generation X is like that much either. I think all people actually contribute and work much more, and are much more committed to organisational change when they all feel that they have a voice and that they can contribute to the ideas for an organisation. So this is just the online and self-paced packages. So there's 4 of these, and we're trying to build in flexibility so that people can do some of this work in their own time. These modules are quite procedural, so we decided that these modules didn't really require the level of critical reflection and professional dialogue that we wanted in the other modules. So just to take you through very quickly, I won't go into these in detail, but these are the core competencies in the Advanced Diploma of Community Sector Management. And you can see that there's 5 core components, 5 core competencies, I better use the right terminology. And these have been woven through the modules. And then in designing the course, we then selected 8 electives, which obviously complemented the modules that we had developed. And so these competencies are also woven through the whole course. And the way we've done this is that we've made sure that 1 or 2 competencies are woven through 1 or 2 modules. And the reason we did that was so that when people do 1 or 2 modules, they can actually get a certificate signed off to say they've completed 2 or 3 competencies, rather than having it all woven through the whole thing and people having to complete the whole qualification before they could actually come out with any piece of paper. And the reason we did that is that we understand how busy people working in education and care services are, and people's circumstances change. So we wanted to be able to have that exit point where people could go away having a record of what they'd achieved and come back into it when they were ready. And that's been quite important for some students as well.
One of the things that we looked at really carefully was that there was a lot of principles embedded in the course, and these were around the National Quality Framework, the Early Years Learning Framework, My Time, Our Place, and the National Quality Standards. So they're interwoven right throughout all the modules, and we really strongly connect that to everyday practice. So it's contextualised for all service types. Anybody can come along to this, and it can be easily related and translated into their service practice. We also look at it as ongoing learning, not only for the educators participating in the course, but also for their staff teams. So a lot of the assessments and practical components really make them go back to their service and reflect as a team about how this looks. And so they can write their assessments with the influence of their team and the concepts of what they're actually doing in their practice and how leadership has informed that. So it's really looking at existing skills and the experience of educators that they already have, and how we can re-motivate and re-energise and build on the leadership within the entire team. So the focus there is around strengths building and capacity building of not only the participant but also the other educators within that service. We also look at shared leadership responsibilities. As Kay talked about, it's around distributed leadership. So that's one of the approaches that we look at, is around how do we delegate? How do we look at other people's abilities within the service? It's around looking at the grounded research, where it's looking at who can support change within a service, who can support leadership, and how do we plan for succession within our service, because one day we might not be there. So how do we inform that and instill leadership in others? A lot of the learning experiences are collaborative within the learning and the face-to-face learning, but when they go back to their services, we continue that collaboration by asking them to talk to their service representatives. So it might be their board, it might be their management committee, their owners, it might be other educators, children and families, and that helps them to look at the whole service community and what leadership means for their service community. And that's what we mean by contextualising it to their individual service. A lot of the methodologies that we use are around building the capacity of whole staff teams, as I mentioned. And this is really embedded in a lot of the theory that we relate to practice within these sessions. So it's not hugely theoretical content. It's about looking at theory, it's critically reflecting on that, and then looking at how that affects our everyday work. So a lot of the modules provide the practical tasks and projects, and this is a lot of fun. We see a lot of interesting feedback and comments from people when they're completing tasks, and usually when they submit their first assessment, they're really, really nervous about how this looks. But what we've found is the growth in people by the time you get to their second, third, and many more assessments after that is just amazing, because they're starting to relax into looking at the whole staff service and whole staff team, and looking at their service as a community and what that learning contributes to their community, which is really important. So a little bit about the course development. We did really closely look at the quality frameworks, the learning frameworks, and how this supports everyday practice. So it's not built in isolation. It's around looking at the national quality standards and what that means for our everyday practice and what it means for our everyday leadership. It's also looking at how it brings learners together to look at leadership in their current role and what their leadership actually looks like now. This is where we use reflection tools and reflection time so that they can look at their learning at the beginning of the course. They can look at it as they progress unit by unit, module by module. And the growth in people is just unbelievable. So we have worked with the vet sector, with assessors and trainers, and we've also looked at service leaders in order to develop the content for this course. And this has helped us bring in a really holistic, integrated approach to how this course looks. It's also had a lot of feedback. All the PSCs have been able to have a good review and have a good say in what the content is. And we also have built in ongoing opportunities for reflection and evaluation of the course. So it's not something that stands alone as it is from development. It's progressively growing as we're learning more about the learning frameworks and quality in practice. So it's a really great qualification for that. There is a lot of reading in this course. One of the things that we really encourage is that professional growth. So we do recommend a lot of readings and we provide these to people right throughout the course, and a lot of them are based on the Australian context. So people like Kay has written an article on distributed leadership. That's in the course. We've got Leanne Gibbs has written some information about policy development, so she's my CEO. We've also got some of the other PSCs that have been involved in integrated research, and that research is involved in the course as well. But then we go to other people like Louise Hard, or we've got other people from Macquarie University and CSU. So a lot of university reputations are around the journals that we're providing, and it's all around currency of knowledge and that contemporary research. We also link people into a lot of websites, the key websites like the ACECQA website, and how to actually delve deeper and find the information that they want and pass this on to their staff teams. So it's not looking at the learning as being isolated for this one person who's leading the service. It's about building everybody's knowledge within the staff team and exploring all the documents that are available. It's also helping people who might not have studied for a while to get back into practice of looking for information. Some of the people that I've been working with in New South Wales might not have studied for 20 years. And so when you start handing them readings and information, they do panic a little bit. So we break it down within the sessions and really analyse the text. And then we look at it in the everyday context and what this actually means within our practice. So it's not reading for reading's sake, it's reading to inform practice.
I'm just going to take you through a little bit about the facilitation. You have seen a bit of that already. But it is really looking at a strength-based approach, and throughout the course we're making linkages between theory and practice so that when we talk about critical reflection, educators and leaders know that it's about actually not just looking at what could have been done or what happened, but actually being able to link that with theory and to really be critical about theory as well as about practice. The activities are very engaging, so unlike what we're doing here, standing up here talking to you, and we're going to stop this in a minute, but unlike standing up here and using a transmission method with this course, we're actually involving people in quite intimate, ongoing, small group activity where they're actually having professional dialogue and having tasks where they actually critically examine issues and also discuss issues which they're struggling with within their services. So as you can imagine with these small groups, we need to actually build up quite a high level of trust so that people feel confident that there's confidentiality within that learning group. And I can honestly say that that's been achieved because some of the things that people share are really, really difficult dilemmas. And in sharing them within the classes, they're able to find new solutions that they had not seen or thought of before. So one of the other things that we're really keen to do in the course as well is is when we use methods, we make it really overt that students can use those methods back in their services. So what we're wanting to do is that the students who participate in the course are actually able to replicate those tasks back in their services. We don't want them to wait till they've done the whole course before they start, taking new risks and adventures with their leadership. We want them to go back to their services and do that straight away. So what we're finding is that the students are able to take some of those exercises around those discussion groups and that critical reflection back to their services and try it with their own educators, which is building the capacity within their services straight away rather than waiting till they finish a qualification. So all of the assessors obviously have to have a qualification to meet the requirements of the vet sector, and all of the people delivering this course have to have experience in leadership in some early childhood or out of school hours care or whatever education and care capacity. So I think, as I mentioned before, the assessments run right through the course, and some of them are quite small. Some of the assessments are actually completed during the face-to-face sessions. The reflective journal that each student keeps is a primary document that actually records quite a lot of their work, and also there are project work tasks that students take away. Some of these projects are small and some are quite significant. So there's a whole range of different ways of assessing learning during this course. But I guess the one thing that's really important is that the assessments are relevant. So because the assessments have been so closely linked to the NQF, the work that students take away to undertake as projects all have relevance to the ongoing development of their service. So while students are completing assessments for this course, they're also doing work, which is really important work for developing their organisation. And we have lots of feedback from students to say that this has been quite critical in terms of making progress in either developing the service's participation in the NQS or a learning framework approach. So you'll see here, this is one of the parts of the course about using a reflective journal for critical reflection, and we also refer extensively to the frameworks in this course so that you can see that students actually are presented with information from the frameworks to justify the rationale for doing this work. And really, I guess what we're really focusing on is making sure that critical reflection is about applying theoretical frameworks for thinking and decision making within services. And the course is suitable for existing leaders. I've got a manager at the moment back at the Gowrie who's doing the course, and she's been a leader in the organisation for 14 years and she's thoroughly enjoying it. So it can be experienced leaders or it can be aspiring leaders. So in the same group we've got a room leader who's been in the role for 6 months who's also really enjoying it. So I think part of that diversity means that students are able to learn from each other through sharing their experience, their perspectives, their wealth of knowledge, and also their emerging ideas. And the courses we run are also across the sector, so we bring together people from different sectors, and I think that also enriches the professional dialogue that occurs during the sessions. So we're leading up to a little activity for you. So just wanted to refresh your memories about taking charge of the NQF. So this module is 2 full days of face-to-face work, plus some after-hours work in doing the assignments. And so, as the title suggests, this module is predominantly about managing the NQS process. So, in looking at this, students are really encouraged to look at their governance structures within their services and how the governance structure is working, and also systems that support their work towards quality improvement and sustaining innovation once they develop it. So you can see from this slide the list of topics that are included in that module, and really trying to ensure that there is a really sound understanding of the rationale for a ground-up approach, and also big picture thinking. We don't want people doing work in terms of their quality improvement plan, which is just about quick fixes or superficial changes. We want people to actually be really engaging with the theory that sits within the learning frameworks and actually making changes which lead to better outcomes for children and families. And so throughout the course we also keep that outcome very much in mind. And I recall Paul saying in there earlier that often we lose sight of what we're working towards, and the philosophy and the vision seem to have got lost along the way. And some of our experience of working with services seems to reflect that, where people have lost sight of the fact that they exist for outcomes for children and families, and sometimes people become so engrossed in day-to-day things within the organisation that you may wonder whether they're actually there to service each other rather than the children and families in the community. Now we're going on to a sample assessment task for you to have a look at. So this is a major project in this module. And this is the task that the students have to tackle. So as you can see, they need to refer to a significant big picture change, and they need to write a 1,000-word report for their governing body or management group or the corporate chain. So this course can be attended by students from any service type. But anyway, this is a 1,000-word report, and it's got to include all of those aspects, so that it's quite a detailed approach to looking at change. So in more detail, students need to think about, okay, what is the change? What's the rationale for the change? How will this change impact on the service? And while they're doing this in the course as individuals, we expect that when they go back into their services, they will actually consult and work collaboratively with staff within their service to actually develop a shared focus for an identified change that they will then work collaboratively with staff within their service to achieve. So you can see the list of criteria that needs to be included in that assignment, and we're now going to take about 5 minutes, and I know the noise level, I'm a bit scared, but I know the noise level is just going to go right up to what it was before. I want you to talk in pairs, and I want you to look at one or two of these questions here in some depth, but I don't want you to try and answer it from a perspective of thinking about a change in a service. I want you to think about it from the perspective of what would participating in this assessment task mean for change within services. So I want you to think about it from, I guess, our perspective of thinking, okay, when we set this task for students, how is this going to support them within their service to implement the NQS? So you've got to maybe talking to the person next to you quietly, and try and look at a couple of those questions and then answer the question about how would that benefit a service? Okay, it's all yours.
All right, so one of the other modules that we're going to introduce you to is leading and managing change. This is actually a really exciting module, and it talks about organisational culture and ethos, which is really important to look at for all services. It's looking back at what the difference is between leadership and management, and that's a really important conversation. And as you can see, there's... out of breath. As you can see, there's a quote here from Siraj Blatchford, a man, that really, really emphasised the importance of looking at leadership and management. And the correlations between the two are quite significant within this course. A lot of people see themselves as a good manager, or they see themselves as a good leader, but quite often they don't see the correlation between the two, that they can be both. But it's also looking at the opportunities for other people to maybe take on some of that management and free people up for leadership. And it's a really important conversation for a lot of leaders, is how do I look at what skills other people can manage to free me up to make that innovative leadership decision? And so that's something that we really look at in here. You can see the key topics explored. Again, that distributed leadership theory. It's looking at who in your organisation can be involved in decision making, who we can support to build their capacity for. And it's really vital that we do look at this for, again, succession planning, and it's also about building the capacity so others can achieve their personal and professional goals. We don't want the person to be working in our service for years and years and years, that really we should have built their capacity and they should have been able to lead a service on their own. So it's looking at that exploration of how we help others to achieve what they would like to. We also look at equity and social justice and situational leadership. So situational leadership is something that's really looking at how you handle and lead maybe a crisis situation or the everyday situations of your service. Is it something that you've got the revolving door going on where everybody's coming to you to make leadership decisions, or are you asking them to be reflective practitioners and asking them the question, well, what do you think we should do? And that's a really big highlight for a lot of people in this session is, oh yeah, why don't I get them to start thinking about that instead of having all the answers? So that's where we start talking about, are you the only person that can make a decision? How is organisational decisions made, and what does that look like within your practice? So we're going to have a look at another activity. Now, this one I'd like you just to make some notes on these questions. So we're looking at the 3 important elements of educational leadership. If you could have a time to write these down, we've also got to look at 2 essential components of your leadership. So we're looking at educational leadership and then your personal leadership. And then we're going to come and ask the audience to help us with some of their responses, some of their thinking. So you've all got paper in front of you. Have a quick think about it. Okay, who'd like to contribute to the 3 aspects of leadership?
I've got open door policy for service users, i.e. parents.
I put knowledge, willingness to take charge, and a team approach.
I've got respect for and a responsive listener, and a belief in diversity of values, but that my leadership is based on philosophy and theories of good practice.
Not to be afraid to make mistakes so that others see you as human.
I like that one. What we find is that there is an endless list, and what people come up with is written up, and we reflect on this as leaders. We reflect on this through the day, and all of these contribute to what we would like to be as leaders, and we explore these further in other sessions. But I'll hand back to Kay now.
Okay, one of the other modules that we look at is the human environment, and I think that this is actually really important as well in following up on Gail's comment as well, because what we find is that in some services there's a terribly high turnover of staff, and that is actually quite damaging for children and families who are using that service, let alone for the staff who are feeling unfulfilled. So we think it's really important that that in this course, leaders are encouraged to think about the human environment that they're providing for their educators. And in this course, one of the tasks that we ask them to do is to reflect on the organisational structure and how the relationships work within the organisation. And this can be quite illuminating for people. It can be a bit of fun, it can be a bit of a challenge really, but also it helps people to think about who holds power within the organisation and what is the reason for that holding of that power, and how do the relationships work? Because if you're trying to implement change and you're thinking it's not working and you're blaming educators because your ideas aren't working, you actually need to stop and take stock of what's happening and how can people actually make contributions. So this module is actually another 2 days face-to-face, but one of the activities we ask people to do is to think about the structure of your organisation and to draw a diagram that reflects that structure, showing the positions and the relationships. So we're going to give you probably three or 4 minutes to do this with the person sitting next to you and have a go at drawing what you think is your organisational structure and just commenting on what that means for people working within your organisation. And in a minute I'm just going to show you some of the structures that students in the course have drawn. So about 3 or 4 minutes to have a go at this task. Okay. I really hate to stop such engagement and dialogue. So when we do this task normally within a group within the course, we'd probably allow about half an hour. And people would have butcher's paper and texters and, a few questions to help them go. But you seem to be doing all right.
Well, we just heard down here, I want to show mine off.
Okay. So does anyone want to just volunteer to talk about what that experience was like, doing that activity? Carolyn's got the microphone here. Any volunteers?
I found it quite revealing talking to the other 2 ladies here because it made me really conscious that mine looks slightly different to my colleagues here. Not in a positive or negative way, but it just where everybody was placed was different, and it just really, and until you look at somebody else's and you think, oh, actually mine doesn't look like that. So I found that really, really helpful, yeah.
Carolyn, there was someone down the back, I think, wanted to.
I was actually going to say something quite similar, that I had written it sort of more like up the top level to down, whereas the lady behind me had the families and the children in the middle of a circle, and then everything else was branching out, and it was all sort of like more a common goal type orientated way of perceiving things.
Okay, thank you. And I will just, I think there's one slide in between, but I will just show you some in a moment. But yes, I mean, it's a really good exercise for people to start thinking about stakeholders, because lots of times people haven't thought about the complexity of the stakeholders who are involved in their service, in their organisation. And this exercise becomes really exciting when you do it with people from the same organisation and they're sitting in different groups and they come back together and they've got totally different drawings for the same organisation. And what does that tell us? I mean, what it tells us is that some people, depending on what power you have within an organisation, you can actually see things quite differently. And so that generates another whole round of discussion and thinking about, okay, what is happening within our organisation? What are we on? Oh, okay, I've just lost my thread for a minute. I thought, oh, what are we up to? So one of the things that we do in the course as well is to actually give students some background about organisational theory. Because as I said earlier, people are not used to thinking about their often small services as organisations. And so with some access to organisational theory, they can start thinking about their services in a completely different way and in a more proactive and powerful way that helps them to understand that they can actually change the structure of their organisation. They can change how people report to each other and relate to each other. So they can actually achieve quite significant things by making small changes. And that's a really important part of this course. So this is an example, and I mean, this is kind of a bit of a Bronfenbrenner kind of diagram, but It's actually quite interesting because the CEO is sitting right in the centre, and I'm not entirely sure that's what Bronfenbrenner would have designed, but it's how someone has seen this organisation, and from having drawn that, people can then have a really good conversation about what does all this mean for us, and it helps them to conceptualise about why they're thinking this way and where they could go to. So here's another one. I'm probably in the way. This is quite, some examples of some more organic ideas about how organisations work. And this one, has all of the stakeholders who are directly involved in the service there, with branches going out to service management and authorities, professional development, so all of the things that the organisation does. And this other one over here is a bit more organic, with all of the influences coming in. Because another thing that people haven't thought about really is the external influences that are impacting on their organisation as well. Often they kind of have a myopic view of the world, that it's just us in here, without really understanding how external forces are shaping what's happening. And then here's another one which is kind of like a traditional hierarchy, and it's got a lot of people in it. But if you consider, what happens to these people who are all sitting down there at the lower part of the organisation? And that's quite a startling revelation when people start looking at it and thinking, why are our educators not feeling engaged? Well, they're probably feeling a bit crushed by that structure, I might add. So it helps people to really think about what's happening within their organisation and to take a bit of charge about how they might want to change that. And here's just another version of that, which is not quite so hierarchical, and it's made an attempt to show all the people within the organisation, and they've grappled with ideas about the benefits and outcomes of the service compared to the organisation requirements. So people have become quite creative and really trying to draw together the theories that they're learning about to represent what's happening within their organisation, which they need to do before they can reconceptualise it.
Because she doesn't have the qualifications behind her, she knows a little bit about the framework, but not much. And that I found that hard, just to let her expand on her understanding. And I said, it's not about the outcome, it's about the process in getting to the outcome. Like you focus on the practice, the principles and everything, and you focus on that, you will get the outcome that you desire. So she's gone, because all she was thinking of was the outcome. How can we program relating to the outcome? So it's not that, it's the process, the journey towards the outcome. So when I see her, I'd say, okay, so what happened? Oh, we did this and we did that, and spoke to that person, and this parent came in, and we had a chat about this, and so that's good. So she's slowly expanding her knowledge and understanding.
Now I apologise because I let the technology leap ahead of me there, and I didn't realise that was just going to play automatically. I'll just go back a step and tell you what that was about. Within the course, one of the assessment tasks is to conduct a mentoring project. Now, the person we just saw on the screen was actually talking about her mentoring project. Now, she had come into the course with a staff member who she was really down on. She was pretty cross with this person because of their, not performing, blah, blah, blah. And in the mentoring project, it had to go over about 3 months, and she had to actually design the mentoring program and then have all the conversations with the staff member to support the growth of the staff member. And then she had to bring the project back to the next session and do a report on it and talk about it. And what I liked about, the report went on a lot longer than that, but what I really liked about it was that she had actually, during the course, realised that you don't leap straight to the outcomes. It's actually about the processes that are involved. And she had been able to let go of control a little bit and allow her educator to understand and work on processes, knowing and having faith that through being able to work on processes that she would reach the outcomes. And so, you know, from a point of her viewing this staff member as a performance problem, she actually realised that she was not giving her space and she was not giving her the support she needed to actually grow and develop as an individual. So as a result of this mentoring project, we had 2 much more satisfied individuals working within this organisation.
We often come back and reflect and revisit on activities, and one of the opportunities to do this is around the human environment. So how we do this is we ask people to revisit this diagram that they've developed and look at some of these reflective questions. So how does your organisation invest in its employees? Around professional development, around incentives, all of those sorts of things. So what opportunities are there for the organisation to invest in you? We also look at how participation is encouraged. So, you know, are you actively engaged in your service? Do you put in additional hours if needed? Do you have family events? How is the community involved in your service? And all of those things contribute to the people's organisational culture and structure. The other things that we look at is the level of autonomy and the ability to make decisions. So it's looking at who gets to make decisions within the organisation, whether they need to come back to a common person or whether there's some responsibility around distributed leadership and how that may look within an organisation. It's also helping people to break down those barriers to letting go of some of the decisions. Are they making minute decisions about, you know, who can order a ream of paper or spend $20 at the local store? You know, what kind of decision making is allowed by educators within the service or by management committees without talking to, you know, other members of the management committee? All of those sorts of things really make a significant impact on your human environment. Then we move on to leading educational change. Now, there's a lot of activities involved in this module, and what we do is we look at qualities around leadership. So what qualities and knowledge leaders possess. And we all have people that have a significant impact on us as leaders. I'm sure if I asked now, who could name some educational leaders that may have an impact on them? Just call them out. Jean? Jean? Sure. Who else? Who's got a leader that has made an impact on them about how they value education, how they maybe look at education in a different light, or who they would like to aspire to be? Anne Kennedy, there we go. Sorry? Karen Kearns? Alma Fleet? Louise Hard? Yes, absolutely, Laura Malguzzi. Now, there's a lot of people that have an influence on us, and what we need to look at is what qualities do they possess as a leader and why does that have an impact on us? So we spend a lot of time looking at our personal visions, our personal philosophies, and how they impact on us as a leader, and where these leaders and their qualities and attributes have an impact on us and who we aspire to be. So we get people to sit together, make a list, and it's up to them to make the list, not us. We then ask them to pull out 5 attributes that they think that they would like to work on through the time in the course and build on those skills and attributes for themselves as a leader. So it's really good reflection on you as a person and who you would like to be and why we see these people as people we aspire to be. Educational change models, as you can see, we do like a diagram. Towards the end of the module on leading and managing change, we talk to participants about what change looks like in their service, and we ask them to think about a really significant transformational change. We ask them to draw how this might look within their service and how it's played out. And this really begins to help people look beyond the quality improvement plan and start thinking strategically about the direction of their organisation. We've had some really great transformational change essays come back, which is a big thing. We've asked leaders about how this looks within their service practice and how it contributes to the transformational leadership within their organisation, and also who's been involved. So it's not just about them leading the change, it's how everybody else has had an impact on that change. And we've found that that's really important, to value others' input. It's not about you making those solo decisions, it's about how change looks within a service. And that's what the National Quality Framework is all about. It's how it involves the entire service on this journey. Educational leadership is a module that we look really carefully at around outcomes for children and engaging educators in looking at pedagogy and documentation and making it authentic within their service. We spend time reflecting on practice, and we also spend a lot of time of looking at the image of the child and how this is influenced by our philosophy and our vision within our service. So what does it look like in everyday practice, and how does this relate to what we're actually doing, how we're actually planning for children's learning, and the pedagogical conversations that we're having as educators within our service around children's learning and development. As you can see, there's a lot of key topics, a lot of key topics explored in this one. Leading programs and pedagogy is a really big one, and as you can imagine, the other big one is documentation and assessment. A lot of people start reflecting on why they document like they do, how they incorporate other influences in their documentation, and it's a really great opportunity for people to share their documentation as part of this process. And we get some really good conversations going from the leaders talking about how their documentation is supported by their philosophy and their vision within their service, which is really important to always link documentation back to what we do, why we do it. One of the sample activities is very much linked to quality area 7. So 7.1 talks about effective leadership and communities of learners. Now we were going to do an activity on this one, but I know that we do want some time for questions at the end, so we might skip this one. And we'll just talk about how, consider if you will, how you might have been involved in a community of learners. So it might have been when we were studying, it might be that we are now. Some people keep in touch through networks, and quite often those networking groups can really contribute to how we perceive our service and how we ongoingly reflect on our practice as leaders. And it can also contribute to our quality improvement plans. Now, some of these educators haven't been involved in networking groups. They feel quite isolated in services. In the New South Wales services, we have people that are sometimes 4 or 5 hours away from other educators, and so for them networking might be done electronically, if at all. So this is a really good opportunity to reflect on other people's educational leadership and what this might have an impact on how they work within their service. So these conversations are really good, and it also establishes the basis for a network for them, and it builds their community of learning. We also look at how a community of learning works within a service and how what we're doing within the modules can contribute to their ongoing learning as a team. It can incorporate management committees. Some of our participants have actually gone back and done these activities with management committees and owners involved, which is fantastic because it's also supporting upskilling everybody within the service. It's not just about the educators. We also look at how the professional culture of the service is impacted by this community of learning and how it really contributes to everybody being engaged in professional dialogue about the National Quality Standard and the learning frameworks, and how this starts embedding these sorts of aspects within our practice. So the more conversations that we're having within our service, the more people are getting comfortable with the terminology, getting comfortable with what they need to be doing as part of their everyday practice. And when assessment and compliance officers come along, it's part of our everyday conversation, and that's what the community of learning is all about within our services.
Okay, we're really sort of rushing through the last few slides now. We knew we had too much stuff. Anyway, one of the really important components of the course methodology is the use of dilemma stories. Now, this is the dilemma stories is an example of where we are having some differences in delivery from state to state. So in South Australia, we are very committed to using dilemma stories, which basically is a process where people come together in very small groups, and they do this within the course, and we encourage this to then occur back in their services. So the idea basically is that in a group of 3 people, each person has a dilemma, something that they're really not quite sure how to approach, or whether they approached it in a way that was appropriate. And so the whole structure of dilemma stories is that one person tells their story and 2 people listen. Listening to someone's story without giving them advice is really, really difficult. So the idea of the dilemma story is that the listeners actually just listen to the story and then they ask questions. And the questions are asked to help people who are telling the story to think about the story from different perspectives without giving solutions. Now, even though we use this technique at work all the time, I still find myself trying to give solutions and I have to go, sorry, I just came up with a solution. So in the course, we help people to practice this technique, which has actually been really important for people identifying social justice and equity issues, but also in everyday leadership issues. So this is a key component for our course in terms of using critical reflection. But because we're running out of time, I think we might skip over the next slide and you can speak about your slide.
Some of the facilitation techniques that we use in New South Wales is around thinking pairs and rounds. So thinking pairs is again similar where we have uninterrupted thinking time, but this time just amongst 2 people. So we have a listener who is actively engaged in the conversation without actually saying anything, and this can be a real challenge. We also have the thinker, and the thinker is allowed uninterrupted thinking time where they're able to just get out their thoughts and process that. And how many of us would love 5 minutes of uninterrupted thinking time? I know it's something that we all cherish. It can be a real struggle though. Some people do find it a bit challenging getting their thinking out, particularly if they're meeting somebody for the first time. By the end of the first day, everybody wants 5 minutes to talk uninterrupted. So it's a really great technique that we've used a lot just to process critical reflection, self-critical reflection, and it also helps get your ideas and thoughts in order. The other one is a round, and we use it as a way of checking in with people particularly at the end of a session. So quite often we'll ask, what have you learnt from this session, and how will you use this within your service? So they'll come up with something. Now, one person goes at a time. They choose the direction of where we go in the room, and that's how we reflect back. Is they've got about 30 seconds of uninterrupted thinking time. And quite often somebody will sit there and go, oh, I'd forgotten about that during the day. So they get to write it down in their reflection journal because we always have those with us. So without interrupting, they quickly make a note, and then when it's their turn to talk, they reflect on something else. So that's the approach we use there. Yeah. We might move along to questions because we're aware everybody wants to go to lunch. I'll come around with the roving mic. I know we definitely have a question up the back, so I'm coming.
Hello, my name's Simone. I'm from Melbourne. I have 2 questions for you, so I'll be quick. The first one is, given the fact that the Advanced Diploma Community Sector Management is under review at the moment, how does that fit into your scheme of things? And the second thing is, I'm curious as to how you would map the Advanced Diploma Children's Services across to the ADDIP ComSec Management, given the units. I think there's only one that's transferable. Thanks.
I'm not entirely sure that that's my area of expertise. We are aware that the course is under review, and our intention is to do the work to update it and to make sure that it remains relevant for this course. The second question, I have to research that. I'm not sure of that answer. Carolyn, do you have a contribution on that?
All of us work in partnership with registered training organisations, and they're all involved in the mapping and development of the course. So everything is co-linked. The mapping process is immense. I've actually been involved in a small snippet of it, and that was beyond me. So we leave it to the experts.
Any other questions?
Well, I guess Kay and I will hang around here. If anybody has any questions, they can certainly come up and have a chat with us. But we'd just like you to thank you all for being part of this. We're really excited about the leadership qualification. Come and talk to us.